शांति का सागर है, सबकी आत्मा आनंद का सागर है, सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर, सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर है, सबकी आत्मा शक्ति का सागर है, सागर है। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। 20 मिनट बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो।
Jai Gurudev. Swagatam to our weekly Maharishi Gita Satsang on chapter 5, Karma Sanyasa Yoga. We will now begin with Shanti Path. Manish ji, Mukesh ji and Ghanshyam ji, आप लोगों में से कोई भी सहनावतु बोलना कृपया।
जी दीदी, जय गुरुदेव।
जय गुरुदेव।
ओम सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यंकरवावहै तेजस्विनामधेतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति।
जय गुरुदेव। अब 5वां अध्याय का पहले 2 श्लोक का पारायण करना।
जी दीदी। ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। अथ पंचमोऽध्यायः कर्म संन्यास योगः। अर्जुन उवाच संन्यासं कर्मणां कृष्ण पुनर्योगं च संससि यच्छेययेतयोरेकं तन्मे ब्रूहि सुनिश्चितम्। श्रीभगवानुवाच संन्यासः कर्मयोगश्च निःश्रेयस्करावुभौ तयोस्तु कर्मसन्न्यासात् कर्मयोगो वशिष्यते। ओम।
Jai Gurudev. We will begin with the recap of the last session. In the first verse, Arjuna asks a question. He says, should I follow Karma Yoga or Karma Sannyasa Yoga? Should I fight or not? Karma Yoga is action and Karma Sanyasa Yoga is inaction. So Arjuna wants to know which is better. So this is the third question Arjuna is asking so far. So I want to quiz you all. And what are the other two questions that Arjuna asked so far? So this is an open book quiz, and I can give a hint. The first question is in chapter 2, and the other question is in chapter 3. And you all can put the answer in the chat box for those who are on the Zoom as well as on ramrajtv. Please go ahead and put it on the chat box. So that was the first shloka. And in the second shloka, Sri Krishna Bhagavan answers Arjuna's question. He says that Karma Yoga is superior to Karma Sannyasa Yoga. And he says that both renunciation and the yoga of action, they both lead to the supreme good. But of the two, the yoga of action, that is Karma Yoga, is superior to renunciation of yoga. So it's better to do the action, Karma Yoga, than to leave action, is what Sri Krishna Bhagavan is saying. So now we will continue our study of shlokas 3 to 7 today. So first, I will read the Sanskrit shlokas 2 times and then once in English, and then we will continue with the reading of the commentary. Jnaya sa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. Jnaya sa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. Know him to be ever a man of renunciation, who neither hates nor desires. Free from the pairs of opposites, he is easily released from bondage. O mighty armed, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. In this verse, Shri Krishna Bhagavan brings out the essential qualities of a man of renunciation, a sannyasi. He is free from desire, while at the same time he rejects nothing. He takes life easily as it comes, creating no tensions. His life flows freely in harmony with the laws of nature, governed by the cosmic law. Such a carefree state of life in freedom is only possible when a man is contented. And contentment is possible only when the mind is established in bliss consciousness, the state of the transcendental absolute, because in the relative field there is no happiness so intense that it could finally satisfy the thirst of the mind for joy. Having gained this state of transcendental consciousness permanently, a man is freed from bondage and lives a life in the eternal freedom of cosmic consciousness. In this state, he lives eternal being as completely separated from the field of activity. This is the state of perfect detachment or Sanyasa, described by Sri Krishna Bhagwan as freedom from the pairs of opposites. Such freedom prevails in transcendental consciousness, cosmic consciousness, and God consciousness. The word easily is of great significance. Freedom from bondage is easily gained by rising above the pair of opposites to the state of being, by rising to that state of sannyasa, the state of separation which naturally exists between being and activity. The state of freedom from bondage can be reached either through the wisdom of Sankhya or the practice of yoga as shown in the following verse. Jagudev?
So, this verse brings out the qualities of a sannyasi. He is free from desire, while at the same time he rejects nothing. He takes life easily as it comes. He is relaxed and does not create any tension for himself or for others. And such a life is possible only when a man is contented. Otherwise, in the relative, one is always looking for more and more happiness. It's like a bottomless pit. Let's say you first have a small job and you're making 20,000 rupees per month and you're renting a house. Then you're promoted, you're making now 50,000 rupees per month and you have a two-wheeler, and then you build a house, then you buy a small car, and then you want a fancy car, you buy a more expensive car, and then you push your children and drag them nuts to excel in school so that they can go abroad and make a lot more money. So is there any end to it? No. You keep on craving for more happiness after you get something because you're not content with whatever happiness you are getting in the relative. So, what is the solution to this situation? Any contentment is possible only when the mind is established in bliss consciousness. Because in the relative, as we have seen, there is no happiness that can satisfy the thirst of mind for joy. So, when you experience bliss consciousness, you transcend and you go beyond the duality of the pairs of opposites, such as hatred and desire, and then you are easily released from bondage. So, now we hear that Sri Krishna Bhagavan and Maharishi are saying that it is easily accomplished. But some of us may disagree with that. I have heard some people say that, yeah, Krishna Bhagavan is sitting up there and saying it is easy, and Maharishi is saying life is bliss. Not really for us, you know. Look what I'm going through. Such difficult time in my life. And somebody said, like Maharishi says, life is bliss, but living is hell. I'm going through such hard time. So, at times like this, if we understand and remember karma philosophy, It helps us a lot. When you are doing everything right, but you are still having difficulties in life, it means that you are going through the prarabdha karma from past life. And once you pass that stage, life becomes really blissful. So, we have to learn to be patient. Shankaracharya said that if you don't have patience, you will never get moksha. So we have to remember that. So now I will briefly cover scientific research. We won't show the graph and all that because this is a repeat of what we have already known. The shloka says that one goes beyond hate and desire, and the study is showing decrease in hostility in the prisoners. We have covered that before. So I'll stop here and take any questions. So any questions? Please go ahead. Okay, no question. So we will move on to the next shloka. Okay. Sankhya yogau pruthak bala pravadanti na panditaha ekamapyasthita samyak ubhayorvindate phalam. Sankhya yogau pruthak bala pravadanti na panditaha ekamapyasthita samyak ubhayorvindate phalam. The ignorant and not the wise speak of the path of knowledge, Sankhya, and the path of action, Yoga, as different. He who is properly established even in one gains the fruit of both.
Jai Gurudev. The teaching of Sankhya brings to light the separation that exists between the imperishable and perishable aspects of life, between being and activity. The practice of yoga, by bringing being into direct experience, also brings to light the separation that exists between being and activity. This is how Sankhya and yoga both lead to freedom from bondage. The phrase properly established is of importance for a true understanding of the teaching of this verse. In order to be properly established in the teaching of Sankhya or yoga, both understanding and experience are of vital importance. Sankhya and Yoga are each sufficient in themselves to bring liberation. Therefore, it does not matter whether the one or the other is given first importance. The wise are those who have risen to the state of freedom. They do not see Sankhya and Yoga as different, not only because both lead to the same goal, but also because the main feature of both is the same practice of transcendental meditation. The only difference is that on the path of Karma Yoga, transcendental meditation alternates with activity on the level of the senses, and on the path of Sankhya with mental activity. But for this small difference, Sankhya and Yoga are the same. That is why the wise do not look upon them as different. This verse and the next present the whole purpose of the 5th chapter, which is to place Yoga and Sankhya on the same footing as far as their results are concerned. Chekute.
So, this verse tells us that both Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga lead us to the same goal of moksha. They're not different in the sense the basis of both is the same. And what is that basis? The basis is practice of transcendental meditation and transcend, go beyond the gunas. This is the requirement to get to the goal of moksha. What they do after TM is different for both paths. One studies scriptures in between and the other goes to work. But they both transcend first before doing that. But the word properly established is important. And what does that mean? It means they should have understanding and experience of transcendence. Not just superficial understanding on the intellectual level, but also experience the transcendence. Only then they are properly established. And wise people, they see this point that you have to experience the transcendence in order to progress, in order to rise in higher states of consciousness. There is a very common misunderstanding. Some people think that if you are very well versed in scriptures and you speak very eloquently, they think you are enlightened. Not really. We see many people who get up on the stage and give lectures, and their lectures are very impressive. And people like that very much. And the person who is speaking also may be very intelligent and wise in giving the discourse. But if that person does not go beyond the three gunas, does not have the direct experience of transcendence, of going beyond the three gunas, then that means he is not properly established. So that is a very important point to remember. So now I will cover scientific research briefly. This also we will not have the graph because this is also a repeat scientific study which shows that there is improvement in intellectual performance with people who practice transcendental meditation regularly. So that regularity needs to be remembered. Then you get the good results. Okay. So I'll stop here and take any questions. If there are no questions, we will move on. to the next verse, verse number 5. Yat sankhyaih prapyate sthanam tad yogairapi gamyate ekam sankhyam cha yogam cha yah pashyati sa pashyati. Yat sankhyaih prapyate sthanam tad yogairapi gamyate. Ekam sankhyam cha yogam cha yah pashyati sa pashyati. The state attained by men on the path of knowledge is also reached by those on the path of action. He who sees Sankhya and Yoga to be one verily he sees. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. This is the verse that promises liberation for both the ways of life, that of a householder and that of a recluse. It establishes the basic unity of Sankhya and Yoga. Eternal liberation is their common goal, and the seer of truth sees it to be so. It is evident that the path of Sankhya does not apply to the life of the householder and that Karma Yoga does. But Sri Krishna Bhagavan says here that the difference between the two paths is resolved when the goal is reached. Only an undeveloped intellect dwells on the differences between them. The wise man sets out upon one or the other and reaches the goal. He does not waste his time and energy in a scrutiny of distinctions. The verse shows that Sankhya and Yoga are designed to satisfy different kinds of people. But so far as their goal is concerned, they are the same. This understanding of the matter finds further justification in verses 24 and 25, which describe the attainment of eternal liberation through yoga and Sankhya respectively, and in verse 21, which speaks of the attainment of immeasurable happiness through both paths. Furthermore, by studying the details of the path of knowledge and that of action, one finds that even the paths themselves are basically the same. The single process of transcendental meditation brings fulfillment to both. That is why he who sees Sankhya and Yoga to be one, verily he sees. The two paths start from and proceed on the common ground of transcendental meditation. And as they advance, both give rise to the same experience of renunciation in cosmic consciousness. But having reached a common milestone in this direct realization of the separateness of being from activity, they still have not attained their final goal. For complete fulfillment, they must proceed further to merge in one goal, in the great unity in God consciousness. Chapter 5 dwells mainly on the experience of renunciation common to both paths. Chapter 6 will give details of their common practice of transcendental meditation, and chapter 7 to 12 will unfold the nature of their ultimate goal, God consciousness, as well as the path to it. Jai Gurudev.
So, this shloka is saying that the goal that is reached by sannyasa is also reached by karma yoga. So, what is that goal? Atma darshan. The goal is moksha. One gains bliss consciousness. And this is described later in this chapter in shlokas 24, 25, and 21. The 24th shloka says, Yonta sukhontararamaha tatanta jyotirevaya sayogi brahma nirvana. Here the word brahma comes. Brahma bhutobhi gacchati. So you get Atma Darshan through Karma Yoga. That's what the verse 24 is saying. And verse 25 says that you get Atma Darshan through Sankhya Yoga. And also, shloka number 21 of this chapter states that Akshaya Sukham means immeasurable happiness is gained by both paths. So, we will study these in greater detail when we get to these shlokas in the next couple of weeks. But as the seekers of truth advance, we now know that both paths take them to experience cosmic consciousness first, and then they continue to evolve, rise in higher states of consciousness to reach the final goal of God consciousness. Because with God consciousness, complete fulfillment comes. And so the knowledge and techniques to rise to God consciousness are given in chapter 7 to 12. So we are in 5 now. So when we get to those chapters, we will discuss more about that. So now we will have scientific research. Can you please display scientific research, please? The shloka is saying that the goal reached by both paths is a path of Sankhya and Karma Yoga. The goal, it is saying that goal is transcendental consciousness. And the study is proving that. And it is showing high levels of EEG coherence measured during transcendental meditation. And as you can see in the chart, can you enlarge it a little bit, please? Yeah. And so you can see on the left side, this increase in EEG coherence is there. And you see increase in concept learning, moral reasoning, academic performance, transcendental consciousness, neurological efficiency, and creativity. So all these are increasing, and this is shown by increased coherence in EEG. Okay. So now, any questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, we will move on to the next shloka. Sanyasastu mahabaho dukkhamaptumayo gataha yoga yukto munirbrahma nachirenadhigacchati. Sanyasastu mahabaho dukkhamaptumayo gataha yoga yukto munirbrahma nachirenadhigacchati. Renunciation is indeed hard to attain without yoga, O mighty aunt. The sage who is intent on yoga comes to Brahman without long delay. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev. This verse makes it quite clear that the state of renunciation indeed hard to attain, that the separateness of being from activity is hard to realize unless the mind is firmly established in being. Here the word yoga does not mean either karma yoga or the practice of gaining transcendental consciousness. It means the state of union itself, transcendental consciousness. The state of Brahman, which is the fullness of the relative and the absolute both together, is best appreciated on the level of union made permanent, transcendental consciousness made permanent. This state of cosmic consciousness gives the experience of sannyasa, the separateness of the self from activity, the separateness of the relative, and the absolute here becomes a living reality. Sri Krishna Bhagavan is referring to this process of making the union permanent when he says, without long delay. This is because the state of union or transcendental consciousness, being blissful in its nature, is always inviting to the mind. The mind arrives at it drawn by its own nature, which is always to want to enjoy more. Thus, the attainment of union becomes easy without resistance. The natural process of gaining this state need only be alternated with the natural activity of daily life to bring it to permanency. Thus, it is clear that the whole process is a natural one. That is why it does not take a long time. A man who has attained cosmic consciousness is always established in the self, even while engaged in activity. This state of consciousness is the mature state of sannyasa, a state of complete non-attachment of the self with activity, even while activity continues in the relative field of life. Such complete non-attachment is not possible unless the mind is established in eternal contentment. The constant practice of gaining yoga or union with divine consciousness brings the mind to the state which gives eternal contentment, thereby establishing a natural state of sannyasa or renunciation. With growth towards cosmic consciousness, contentment grows, and with the growth of inner contentment, appreciation of the separation between being and activity increases until the mind becomes rooted in the nature of being. It has then achieved cosmic consciousness. By showing the difficulty of attaining renunciation without yoga, Sri Krishna Bhagavan indicates the simplicity of rising to a state where yoga and sannyasa will become the daily habit of life. This verse sings the glory of union. Sunita, can you just minimize a bit? Yeah, thank you. This verse sings the glory of union. It is the basis of true renunciation and gives rise to the state of Brahman in man's daily life. The next verse shows how, by means of this union, a man rises above the binding influence of action and lives a life of eternal freedom. Jai Gurudev.
So, here in this shloka, yoga means union. Union of what? Jivatma with Paramatma, which eventually leads to Brahmi Chetana. It is interesting that all along we heard that it is easy. Everything is easy. We heard that many times. But in this verse, it is saying that it is difficult. Why? Because reaching Brahmi Chetana needs constant practice. If you heard carefully, towards the end of the commentary, Maharishi made this point that constant practice is necessary. First, you have to be regular in meditation, and only then you will reach cosmic consciousness. But that's not the end of the story. Even after reaching cosmic consciousness, you have to be regular and intent on and continue sadhana if you want to rise to God consciousness, then unity consciousness, and then Brahmi Chetana. Because if you are listening carefully, the word Brahman is used. So, and it says, the sage who is intent on yoga comes to Brahman without long delay. So, the ultimate goal is to reach Brahmi Chetana. And for that, one has to do constant practice. Now, let us see what Brahman is. Brahman means fullness of relative and absolute. It is coexistence of opposite values of silence of Shiva and infinite dynamism, that is Shakti. So Shiva is silent and Shakti is dynamic. In other simple words, constant awareness of Shiva and Shakti in your awareness at the same time. That is Brahmi Chetana. And this is best appreciated when the yoga, the union in transcendental meditation is made permanent. And this happens when you rise to God consciousness, unity, and Brahmi Chetana. So this point is made very clear that one has to be intent in practice. One has to do constant practice regularly without missing TM. And that may be difficult for some people. And that's why it is said that reaching higher states of consciousness, there may be some difficulty. So that is how we need to understand. And this point is made very clear in chapter 9 also of Bhagavad Gita, where we are studying that in our other Maharishi Gita Satsang now. Chapter 7, 8, and 9 are saying that two things are absolutely necessary. Number one, TM, AM, PM. That is our slogan. So that's one thing. There is no going around with that. No way we can do without that. The second point is, it's easy. I mean, the second point is you take it easy in between your morning and evening meditation. You do not strain or you don't get tired by doing too much work. If you are very tired and if you are working very hard in between your morning and evening meditation, then it will not allow for the integration to take place. Integration of inner divinity into the relative. This is also called as infusion of being. So if you are busy and straining during the daytime, then you're not giving for the integration to take place. So now the next point is why Brahman is attained without long delay. Because we use TM, and TM is a natural and easy technique. We all know that. It uses the natural tendency of the mind to move towards the greater happiness. Just like the child runs to the mother spontaneously, without effort. Like that. So, now we will move on to scientific research. And the shloka says that those who are intent on yoga and TM program rise to higher states of consciousness. And the study shows that TM practitioners report increase in experiences of higher states of consciousness. You see in the chart that increased experience increased EEG coherence, you see, and that results in increased self-development. And we have studied that also, in the past. And this is kind of a little bit of repetition of what we have studied. You can see in the chart here. Okay, so now we move on to the next shloka, but let's take any questions. If there are any questions, please go ahead. Okay. Next shloka, please. Yoga-yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyah sarvabhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. Yoga-yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyah sarvabhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. Intent on yoga. Pure of spirit. He who has fully mastered himself and has conquered the senses, whose self has become the self of all beings, he is not involved even while he acts. Jai Gurudev, this is a long commentary, so we will be pausing in the middle of commentary, and then I will make a few comments, and then we will move on to the next one. Okay, go ahead, please.
Jai Gurudev. Here, as in the previous verse, the word yoga does not mean either karma yoga or the practice of transcending. It is used in the sense of unity of mind with being. Intent on yoga, one who is never out of the self, whether walking, dreaming, or in the state of deep sleep. Such a man is established in himself, and no experience of relativity is able to overshadow his status of absolute being. Pure of spirit, one who has reached the state of being absolute consciousness, which is ever the same in its eternal purity, and who has established that state in the very nature of his mind. Action is a veil which hides this essential nature of the self. Meditation is a process of diving through all the subtle levels of activity. When the subtlest level is transcended, the mind gains the state of pure being. When the mind, being that, comes out into the field of activity, then the self is said to shine forth in its purity. When through the constant practice, complete integration of the self with the mind is achieved, the pure status of being gained by the mind is not in any way overshadowed, even though the mind occupies itself with activity in the relative field. This is the state of cosmic consciousness, where the self has separated itself completely from the field of activity. In this state, where absolute being and the relative world of activity are lived simultaneously, the self is said to have been permanently freed from all stain. It has achieved absolute purity. He who has fully mastered himself, self has two connotations, lower self and the higher self. The lower self is the aspect of the personality which deals only with relative aspect of existence. It comprises the mind that thinks, the intellect that decides, the ego that experiences. This lower self functions only in the relative states of existence, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, remaining always within the field of relativity. It has no chance of experiencing the real freedom of absolute being. That is why it is in the sphere of bondage. The higher self is the aspect of the personality which never changes, absolute being, which is the very basis of the entire field of relativity, including the lower self. A man who wants to master himself has to master the lower self first and then the higher self. Mastering the lower self means taking the mind, intellect, ego from the gross fields of existence to the subtler fields until the subtlest field of relative existence is transcended and transcendental absolute unmanifested being is reached in the divine consciousness. This robs the lower self of its individuality, bound by time, space, and causation, and sets it free in the state of universal existence. When the lower self has been mastered by the higher self in this way, and the higher self has accepted it completely, then the two become one. And then a state develops in which each is found intimately within the realm of the other in complete cohesion of existence. When the divine consciousness of the transcendental absolute being is found in coexistence with the mind in the relative existent in the field of time, space, and causation, then the mastery of the higher self is accomplished. The Absolute has been, as it were, brought out from the transcendental field of existence to serve and support the field of relativity. The never changing is brought into life of the ever changing. The relative states of existence, waking, dreaming, and sleeping, are infused with absolute state of being. Eternal freedom has become infused into the field of bondage. Sorry. The unity of the divine nature is lived in the multiplicity of diversified creation. This enables a man to live a life of eternal freedom in the world of transitory existence. Thus, the master of the self, enjoying the whole field of relativity, lives the life of absolute being in divine consciousness. Hemaji, you want me to halt here or in the next chapter?
After this paragraph,
Yes. It is interesting to discover how the process of transcendental meditation succeeds in mastering both self and the self. The inward stroke of meditation takes one to a state where the mind is freed from individuality, surrenders itself to the higher self. This is the mastery of the lower self. The outward stroke of meditation brings the mind out infused with being. As a result of constant practice, the mind then leaves absolute being in all fields of relative life, thus, the mastery of the higher self. Thus, mastery of the self and of the self is accomplished by means of inward and outward strokes of a single technique of transcendental meditation. Check with it.
okay. So, what we have read so far is about some of the main points in this shloka. There are very beautiful points in here. So far, what we read, we are learning that by means of yoga, which means union, one rises above the binding influence of action. So the point that's made is one has to be intent on yoga. That means just now we said PM, AM, PM, without fail, every single day. We don't get up and think, oh, whether I should meditate today or not. We just automatically do it. So that way you are intent on yoga. Then the next point is one should be pure in spirit. The Sanskrita word used is Vishuddhatma. When we transcend, we experience pure consciousness. And when we come out of meditation, we bring out that purity out into activity. And then we become pure. The next point is one who mastered himself. The Sanskrita word is Vijitatma. Self has two meanings. One is higher self and one is lower self. So lower self is what we experience in relative life, in waking, dreaming and sleeping states. And higher self means Atma. So first we have to master the lower self by transcending. Then it becomes one with higher self. Remember Maharishi's definition of transcending? He said, Man Atma mein bait jata hai. Man, it merges in the Atma. So then Atma is found, when Atma is found in coexistence with mind in the relative existence, in time, space and boundaries, then higher self is mastered. So the absolute is brought out from the transcendental field into the relative. This again, like I said before, this is called as infusion of being. Then unity is lived in multiplicity. So with transcendental meditation, we conquer both of them. With inward stroke, that is when we are going inward towards Atma, we conquer the lower self. And with outward stroke, that is when we are coming out of meditation, we bring that inner divinity into the outside world. That is called outward stroke. Then we are conquering the higher self. So that's what we read so far. Now we will continue reading and then I'll make main points at the end of reading. Go ahead, please.
Has conquered the senses, has mastery over them. In actual fact, the senses are always under the command of the mind. Everyone knows that the eyes will see only if and when a man wishes to see. If he does not wish to see, he will not do so even with open eyes. If he does not wish to see, he will not do so even with open eyes. Therefore, victory over the senses seems to have no obvious meaning. The inner meaning of this expression is that when being first begins to be infused into the nature of mind, the mind becomes as if intoxicated with the feeling of self-sufficiency. When the mind in this state acts through the senses, it behaves in a rather carefree manner, which may be thought of as akin to indifference. In a more advanced state of enlightenment, this peculiar sense of indifference diminishes. and the behavior of the mind becomes more natural. Activity in the outer sphere of life becomes harmonized with the natural state of inner silence. Activity goes on as a result of the coordination between mind and the organs of action. At the same time, coordination between mind and the senses of perception enables the senses to register experience. With infusion of being into the mind, the senses of perception, while engaged in the process of experiencing, do not register deep impressions of experiences. The impressions they receive are just sufficient to enable them to experience, but are not deep enough to form the seed of future desires. This happens more and more effectively as the mind becomes more established in being. Such then are the inner mechanics of mastering the senses. A real conquest is that where the enemy ceases to be an enemy. He is left free to do as he likes, but is not in a position to attack or do any harm. The conquest of the senses is so fully accomplished through the mastery of the self that the senses are left free to function, and notwithstanding all the experiences of the relative field, life is firmly established in the eternal freedom of divine consciousness. Once the self is experienced as separate from the senses and their activity, in the state of cosmic consciousness, a man sees within himself the state of unbounded being, on one side, and involvement in the world of forms and phenomena on the other. He sees every living being as supported by that being which is his own self. Thus, he naturally experiences his self as the self of all beings, and in the state he is not involved even while he acts. This non involvement can also be understood from another point of view. The light of a lamp is invisible in the light of the sun. The glory of the drop has no effect on the glory of the ocean. The joy of an action leaves no lasting impression upon the bliss of cosmic consciousness. Therefore, once a man is established in this state, he naturally enjoys so great a fullness of being that he never feels he is out of it. For him, action does not involve coming out of the self. There is, indeed, never any chance of his doing so. That is why Sri Krishna Bhagavan says that he is not involved even while he acts. He is firmly secured in cosmic existence, which, though the very basis of all action, is without activity. For him, it is as if everything were going by itself. This state is further described in the next two verses. Jai Gurudev.
A few more points are brought out. And the next point is Jitendriya. That means one who mastered the senses. So, with the infusion of being into the mind, the experience of the senses of perception does not register deep impressions, not deep enough to form the seed of future desires. We have discussed this in the past sessions, where before meditating, when we perform actions, that is, before we learn to meditate, and those who perform actions, the deep impressions are formed. It's like drawing a line on the rock. And then as you learn to meditate, and as you continue to meditate, what happens? The desires, the actions do not make that deep impressions. They are less deep. It's like drawing a line in sand. You draw it, but you can quickly erase it. It's not like permanent, like it is on the rock. And then as you progress, it is like drawing a line in water. As you draw the line disappears. And then it is like drawing a line in the air. You draw the line, but the line is not there. So in this state where you experience yourself as separate from activity, you are performing action, but it's not causing any impression on the mind, because the mind has merged in the Atma and you experience it separate, and still you are acting, and these actions do not produce an impression. So that is the best advantage of transcending. And the real conquest is that the enemy ceases to be the enemy. The actions are there, but they are not producing impressions. By producing impressions, they are acting like enemy because they are keeping you bound in the relative. So when you experience self as separate, that man is free from the influence of the action. And then he can do anything he wants. And in this situation, it is like you have a thief, but he's not able to cause any harm to you. The enemy is not able to do any harm. It's like a snake whose poison is taken out. Then even if the snake bites, then you don't get the poisonous effects of the snake. So this is the benefit of transcending. We break the cycle of action, impressions, desire, actions, and all that. So the next point here is the self. He experiences self as self of all beings. That is, Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. So when you experience yourself as separate from activity, you are experiencing bliss consciousness and unbounded awareness. So that's on one side. And then on the other side, you are experiencing multiplicity of relative. You are in the relative. So one side is absolute, the other side is relative. And because you have that bliss consciousness, everything in the outside world looks beautiful. You know how, I'm sure some of you feel, when you're happy, everything looks happy. You say life is beautiful because you're inside, you're happy, and anything, in the outside world doesn't bother you. You just see that life is beautiful because you are feeling so happy and beautiful inside. And when one experiences himself as separate from activity, he is not involved even when he acts. Kurvannapi na lipyate. And another way of looking at non-involvement is, just like a small lamp is not seen in the bright light of the sun. So when in bright sunlight, if you turn the light on, you hardly see it, it doesn't make any impression. And also, the glory of the drop has no effect on the glory of the ocean. Just like that, the joy of an action has no effect on the bliss consciousness of cosmic consciousness. So now we will do scientific research. The shloka is saying that one who mastered the senses has self-control. And the study is showing just that, more internal locus of control, as evidenced by decrease in the use of drugs and alcohol, and also decrease in mental disturbance. It is also showing more frequent experiences of higher states of consciousness and self-sufficiency. Okay, so we'll stop here and I'll take any questions. If there are any questions or main points or appealing points or any comments, please go ahead. Okay, so if there are no questions or comments, we will now do brief group meditation, and then we will have a 5th chapter Parayana by our Maharishi Vedic Pandits. So let's sit comfortably and do meditation. जय गुरुदेव. Now we will have chapter 5 Parayana. Pandit मुकेश जी एंड मनीष जी, कृपया 5वां अध्याय का पारायण करना.
जी दीदी. जय गुरुदेव.
जय गुरुदेव.
ओ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद् गीते भवद्वेषिणी. यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैर्वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैर्गायन्ति यं सामगाः. ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणा. देवाय तस्मै नमः. ॐ श्री परमात्मने नमः. अथ पंचदशोऽध्यायः कर्मसन्न्यासयोगः. अर्जुन उवाच अथ पंचमोऽध्यायः कर्मसन्न्यासयोगः. अर्जुन उवाच सन्न्यासं कर्मणा कृष्णं पुनर्योगं न संसति यच्छ्रेय एतयोरेकं तन्मे ब्रूहि सुनिश्चितम्. श्रीभगवान् उवाच सन्न्यासः कर्मयोगश्च निःश्रेयस्करावुभौ तयोस्तु कर्मसन्न्यासात् कर्मयोगो विशिष्यते. ज्ञेयः स नित्यसन्न्यासी यो न द्वेष्टि न काङ्क्षति निर्द्वन्द्वो हि महाबाहो सुखं बन्धात् प्रमुच्यते. साङ्ख्ययोगौ पृथक् बालाः प्रवदन्ति न पण्डिताः एकमप्यास्थिता सम्यग् उभयोर्विन्दिते फलम्. यस्साङ्ख्यै प्राप्यते स्थानं तद्योगैरपि गम्यते. एकं साङ्ख्यं च योगं च या पश्यति स पश्यति. सन्न्यासस्तु महाबाहो दुःखमाप्तुमयो गतः. योगयुक्तो पुनर्ब्रह्म न चिरेणाधिगच्छति. योगयुक्तो विशुद्धात्मा विजितात्मा जितेन्द्रियः सर्वभूतात्मभूतात्मा कुर्वन्नपि न लिप्यते नैव किञ्चित् करोमीति युक्तो मन्येत तद्विता पश्यन् श्रवन् स्पृशन् जिघ्रन् अश्नन् गच्छन् स्वपन् श्वसन् प्रलपन् विसृजन् गृह्णन् उन्मिषन् निमिषन्नपि इन्द्रियाणेन्द्रियर्थेषु वर्तन्त इति धारयन् ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपत्रमिमां वश कायेन मनसा बुद्धया केवलैरिन्द्रियैरपि योगिनः कर्म कुर्वन्ति सङ्गं त्यक्त्वात्मशुद्धये युक्तः कर्मफलं त्यक्त्वा शान्तिमाप्नोति नैष्ठिकीम् अयुक्तः कामकारेण फले सक्तो निबध्यते सर्वकर्माणि मनसा संन्यास्यास्ते सुखं वशे नवद्वारे पुरे देहि नैव कुर्वन्य कारयन् न कर्तृत्वं न कर्माणि लोकस्य सृजते प्रभुः न कर्मफलसंयोगं स्वभाववस्तु परवर्तते न दत्ते कस्यचित् पापं नैव चैव सुकृतं विभो अज्ञानेनावृतं ज्ञानं तेन मुह्यन्ति चन्तवः ज्ञानेन तु तदज्ञानं येषां नाशतमात्मनः तेषाम् आदित्यवज्ञानं प्रकाशयति तत्परं तद्बुद्धयस्तथात्मानस्तन्निष्ठा तत्परायणाः गच्छन्त्य पुनरावृत्ति ज्ञाननिर्धूतकल्मषाः विद्या विनय संपन्ने ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि सुनिचैव स्वपाके च पंडिता समदर्शिना यहैतेर्जितः सर्गो येषां साम्ये स्थितं मनः निर्दोषं हि समं ब्रह्म तस्माद् ब्रह्माणि ते स्थिता न प्रियश्चेत् प्रियं प्राप्य नो द्वेजित् प्राप्य च प्रियं न प्रहस्येत् प्रियं प्राप्य न द्वेज्येत् प्राप्य च प्रियं स्थिरबुद्धिरसम्मूढो ब्रह्मविद् ब्रह्मणि स्थितः बाह्यस्पर्शे स्पृशस्तात्मा विन्धत्यात्मनि यत् सुखम् सा ब्रह्मयोगयुक्तात्मा सुखमक्षयमश्नुते एहि संस्पर्शजा भोग दुःखयोनय एव ते आद्यन्तवन्तः कौन्तेय न तेषु रमते बुधः शक्नोति हैव यः सोढुं प्राक्शरीरविमोक्षणात् कामक्रोधोद्भवं वेगं स युक्तः स सुखी नरः योऽन्तः सुखोऽन्तरारामस्तथान्तर्ज्योतिरेव यः स योगी ब्रह्मनिर्वाणं ब्रह्मभूतोऽधिगच्छति लभन्ते ब्रह्मनिर्वाणम् आश्रयात् क्षीणकल्मषाः छिन्नद्वैधायतात्मानः सर्वभूतहिते रताः कामक्रोधवियुक्तानां यतीनां यतचेतसाम् अभितो ब्रह्मनिर्वाणं वर्तते विदितात्मनां स्पर्शान् कृत्वा बहिर्बाह्याश्चक्षुश्चैवान्तरे भ्रुवोः प्राणापानौ समो कृत्वा नासाभ्यन्तरचारिणौ यतेन्द्रियमनोबुद्धिर्मुनिर्मोक्षपरायणः विगतेच्छाभयक्रोधो या सदा मुक्त एव सः भोक्तारं यज्ञतपसां सर्वलोकमहेश्वरं सुहृदं सर्वभूतानां ज्ञात्वा मां शान्तिमृच्छति। ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मसन्न्यासयोगो नाम पञ्चदशोऽध्यायः। ॐ श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु। जय गुरुदेव।
Jai Gurudev. All can come on cameras now to say Jai Gurudev to Maharishi Ji.
Jai
All
Gurudev.
together. Jai Gurudev. Thank you all for joining. My special thanks to Anita Ji today. She read in spite of having a throat situation. I could tell she put so much, effort into it. I really appreciate and admire Anita Ji, how intent you are on the Maharishi Satsang and how you always contribute by reading so nicely. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And thank you,
Thank
Sunita
you.
and Hima, for
Thank you. Jai
displaying and reading. And thank you to our Vedic Pandits for reciting so beautifully. And thank you, Bela, always joining us, quietly listening and joining us every week. Thank you all. We will meet again next week, same time.
Ji Didi,
Jai
Jai
Gurudev.
Gurudev.
Namaste.
Jai
Jai
Gurudev.
Gurudev. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev, Bela. See you next week. I'll end the meeting now. Okay.